I should say good afternoon, I guess, by now. My name is Mr. Doderer, and I am a teacher at Painesville Independent Schools in Painesville, Kentucky. And to be quite honest with you, this is an extension of a previous project. Last year we did the Trout in the Classroom project using rainbow trout and had pretty good success. So we went for a little bigger challenge this year, and it's to raise brown trout from the egg stage to the fingerling stage, and to release those trout in a wildlife management area located at Painesville Lake. We had a lot of success last year. We're expecting to do the same this year. Although the brown trout are said to be a little harder to raise, so it's a bit more of a challenge. So what we have is we have a 120-gallon cold water tank in our classroom, and we're basically created a miniature freshwater ecosystem. Now, the main goal of this whole project was for me to better teach the nitrogen cycle. A lot of times biology teachers will teach the water cycle and carbon cycle with little difficulty, but students find the phosphorus cycle and nitrogen cycle much more challenging. There's a lot of bacteria that are involved in that biological filter that's in a tank. So the critical thing here is that you maintain your water quality. And being that I'm using this for ecology classes too, water quality is one of the main issues that we address throughout the year. So our students learn to do chemical analysis of the water. They are trained to use Lamont kits, which are good enough for government agencies to use. The kids learn how to conduct and gather data about dissolved oxygen within the water, the pH of the water, the ammonium levels, the nitrate levels, and they learn the bacteria that are instrumental in maintaining those levels to appropriate levels in which the fish can live. The range of tolerance is addressed by students. We have guest speakers that come in from the Division of Water, and we also have fish and wildlife biologists come in. Students will report also their findings on contaminants that affect our waters in eastern Kentucky and our watershed, the Big Sandy watershed. And so students get to present their own findings on what they feel are some of the issues in water contaminants that affect our waterways. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the most important contaminant that we have is actually sedimentation. So we think of mercury levels and we think of heavy metals and things like that that have gotten in our water over the years, but in fact those levels are much lower now than they were 30 years ago. So the students will raise the trout. They will learn how to measure water quality using the chemical analysis. In the spring, we have guest speakers come in and talk about the macroinvertebrates, which are the biological indicators of water quality. So water quality is a central theme. When the students finish growing the trout to probably about 3 inches long, we will then release them at a fish and wildlife management area called the Little Paint Creek. Last year we were able to find funding to visit Kentucky's only cold water facility for raising trout. It's called Wolf Creek National Fish Hatchery in Jamestown, Kentucky. It's right at the Lake Cumberland there at Wolf Creek Dam. It's a hydroelectric plant there at the dam. They are the only cold water facility in the state of Kentucky that grow the trout and supply the trout that's stocked in all of our waters in Kentucky. I don't know if we'll find the funding for that this year or not, but we did last year. So the students get this aquarium. They realize that this aquarium is the miniature ecosystem for the brown trout. They are challenged to keep the trout alive. They get to collect data all through the year. This year we're going to add some data on survival rates. We're going to do mortality rates early on. You lose a lot of fish that are either not able to develop in the egg stage, or they were considered blanks. These are eggs that are not fertile to begin with. This year we obtained nearly 600 eggs. I've got some photos up here I'd like to share with you. When you go to the facility, if you get down there, you have to have permits. I learned that from last year. I didn't realize that you had to have permits to get these eggs. I wrote the grant and got the grant before I got the permits. And when you get a permit to obtain the eggs, you also have to have a permit to let them go. So I kind of broke the law a little bit last year. I had one release illegally and one release legally, but nothing bad happened there. So we're all legal this year. The ideal, though, is my students get to see the difference between a man-made environment and the impact that we have on our water quality, and what they need to do and what they can do to sustain, healthy water ecosystems and healthy water supplies for the future. So they learn through their discussions, through their presentations, and our guest speakers that visit us about water quality in such a way that they can take pride in that they've learned ways in which they themselves can impact in a very positive way the sustainability of our freshwater supply. And water is very important, we know, in nature. It's very important in any way, in any aspect. Some people actually believe that if the event that there's a third world war, that it wouldn't be over fuels, that it could possibly very well be over freshwater supplies. That we have very little available freshwater supplies. Less than 1% of all the water that we have on the earth is usable, potable water. That's most of it's locked up into the aquifers, and a good portion in the ice caps and the polar ice caps that we have. So the kids get to learn a lot of hands-on measurement of pH and measuring dissolved oxygen. So they get that lab experience. Then they get the experience of presenting their findings from their own research about what contaminants affect Kentucky waters. They get the guest speakers to come in and solidify some of the understanding and misconceptions that we have about water. And then finally it culminates where they get to do something very exciting. That's to release their fish that they've raised into a wildlife management area. So that's basically a roundabout way. But if you get down there, they actually use the displacement method to measure these eggs. You wonder how you get the count of 600 or whatever. They take and they measure by volume. They have a formula, and they pour the eggs into like a graduated cylinder, and you use the displacement method to determine the approximate number of eggs that you're given. So it's really neat. If you ever visit the facility, it's well worth your trip at Wolf Creek National Fish Hatchery there. We've got a lot of people there that support us. They were very surprised. One of the few schools in East Kentucky that's ever attempted this. There's some northern Kentucky schools that's done some trout in the classroom projects, but they've not had a lot of success where, they said it's common for, there to be a failure. So don't get disheartened if, things go wrong, because it's so easy for your water quality to get out of control or out of whack to where it causes, problems with a spike, for example, in the ammonia levels, or, your pH drops or rises too quickly. And so there's a lot of things to learn as a teacher in this, as well as the students. And I find it a very great way to teach students about the nitrogen cycle and the importance of water quality and how to test for good water. And so the kids get to recognize that. So that's part of being environmentally literate. And so our students, hopefully, when they finish this program, they become more environmentally literate. We do a pre-test and we do a post-test to measure what students knew beforehand and after their experiences with the Trout in the Classroom project. Thank you. Were there any questions? Anyone have any ambition in doing this type of project? Get out with me. I'll give you everything that I have. And let me tell you, the biggest thing is to do your water changes. Any other questions? All right, thank you. No, they're too small to tag, but we do release them in a prescribed area. This is crazy. I've got a cell phone here. Called me. There's a prescribed area at Little Paint Creek where there's like pools of water, and then there's stretches of rapids, and then pools of water. So we strategically find structure that we know that they're going to be able to, hide in and stuff until they can get some size. Of course, there's going to be predation, and there's some of them are going to be eaten by other fishes and things like that are in that water. But for the most part, we try to encourage that. Trout, rainbow trout especially in our state, they're a sport fish, and the sportsmen pay a lot of that, and the people that buy a fishing license support that. But there are some waters in Kentucky that are a lot better than others, and there's one other type of trout that we'd like to get a hold of, but they're very hard to get a hold of, and that's the brook trout. And we would have to travel much further and find a different location that's suitable for those to be released. So the next trout after this, if there is another year of this, would be the brook trout, and I'd probably have to twist a few arms here and there and make a few calls because they're very stingy with the brook trout. But they're a beautiful fish. If you've ever been fishing for trout, they're fun to fish for. They're a good source of food, but they're also a very important part of the aquatic ecosystem as well. You're welcome. Is that the